Welcome to Watching Westworld, the officially unofficial podcast for Westworld on HBO. I'm Jim.
I'm A.Ron.
Today we're talking about Season 3, Episode 5, titled Genre. Seen it a few times now. A.Ron, multiple viewings. What did you think?
I think that there's a lot going on. There's a lot of things that are open to interpretation, which, hello, it's Tuesday and this is Westworld. I think that the things that we said on the Instant Take podcast about, how this is fundamentally very interesting and intellectually stimulating exercise that is suffering for some execution problems. Like, as you mentioned, a lot of the middle parts of the episode kind of drag. I don't think, a second watch improved that any. But I was just noticing more and more things that kind of point to things happening under the hood, things that are not quite as they seem. Connections to previous episodes, thematic connections that I think are super interesting. And like I said, I'm all on board with the story, this season's central storytelling and the characters. And I guess I don't know, like I wasn't as bothered by some of the draggy parts in the middle because my expectations for Westworld doing really exciting action scenes are already kind of baked in. Like, my expectation is they're not. It's going to, if I'm hoping for competent, but like exciting and like pulse pounding is just, I don't think that's a gear that this team is trying for. In fact, they might even be doing it as like, as I've said, a stylistic choice. But the stuff they're talking about, societal and AI and predictive analysis and simulation, I think all that is still really interesting. And there's a lot of big questions in this episode. What did you think on subsequent watches?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with all of that. I think the second watch did nothing for the bad scenes, but did quite a bit for the good parts of this episode, which I think are, primarily centered around Ciroc and Vincent Cassell's performance, which is fantastic. Really goes a long way in those scenes. And I think so far, like the best part of this episode is clearly his origin story,
Right?
And how it relates, to what's going on now, and also what's going on in our society currently. There are just so many parallels here where we should be asking ourselves the questions that Westworld is dealing with the future of, that I think are super important for our place and time right now. But like overall, I think the style of this thing is still pretty impeccable, even if they don't maybe use it to full effect. We've talked about how the music always works in this show, and I think it absolutely worked in this episode, except there were some things with the storytelling that didn't quite complement those things. The excellent visuals, the excellent sounds in the show. But, I don't want to harp too much on that because there are a lot of interesting questions that we'll get to over the course of discussing this episode.
Sure. Maybe we should get to it.
Yeah, I wanted to start off by talking maybe about these stacks of rings that we see.
Yeah,
because we're going to get one pretty soon.
I wanted to ask you about that because someone sent in an email that because I caught that in real time, saying that like that seems to me like you're navigating the ring. We've been conditioned to believe is Rehoboam's like real-time analysis of the state of flux or the state of things going according to plan. And when you see multiple of those rings, you're zooming in and out of them, they're corresponding to these files. I'm thinking those must be, they talk about Rehoboam running millions of simulations. Like, I'm thinking you're navigating those. But another listener sent in a piece of feedback saying that to them, it reminded them of the time machine. This is from Basil. He said it reminded him of the time machine for Mac, where you can go back to older dates in a similar way, the interface for that. But I'm not a Mac user. Do you see that?
I've never used Time Machine.
Oh,
but yeah, it's their backup software, which keeps incremental backups.
Gotcha.
Huh.
Because the other thing is,
I'm kind of curious. I want to go check it out.
The other thing is, like, it also seemed to correspond with like him talking about his past, and we see at the end that Delores gets his cognitive compilation files or whatever. And I wonder if but I don't understand the I don't understand the tie into Rehoboam's ring. If those are intended to be like, oh, let's navigate to another part of Ciroc's history and analyze that. What's with the whole ring? That's like the whole globe being simulated. What was your thought on that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like these stacks are sort of representative of each person's prediction model, basically. And each ring within the stack is sort of a data point that heuristic is using to calculate their particular trajectory. As far as it relates to like the other ring that we see, which is kind of the free energy ring, as I'll call it. I'm not quite sure how those relate visually, or systemically, I guess, but I don't know. It seemed like it was visually trying to represent like a portion of a whole kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a couple
And
of instances where the ring is not complete. Like there was one scene
not
in the
complete.
jet where one of his underlings is giving him a thing, and there's like a I don't know, seventh of the circumference of the circle that's just disappeared. And I thought when I remember watching it the first time, I'm like, I wonder if we're at a point in time where Rehoboam wasn't like worldwide yet or something. So you're actually seeing an incomplete set of predictions or whatnot. But like, I don't think that's the case. So now
there's
I'm like,
also. Go ahead. Sorry.
so now I'm trying to think like, what would that mean? Does that mean that in that quadrant of whatever it's analyzing, that its simulation and prediction is that and actual events are completely synchronous? Because I kind of think that the fuzzier the ring gets, the more out of whack the prediction is. So if the ring is invisible, then it's like completely in sync. But I don't know, or maybe it's just
I'm trying to think. Doesn't Ciroc say something when he's talking smack to Daddy Dempsey? he says something about like there are certain pockets of like white space that
certain moments of agency
that are moments of agency, like where you can actually make a choice. So I wonder if that's like. Yeah, it doesn't quite line up with everything else we've been seeing if the white space were, the anomalies, but I don't know. It seems to make more sense what you're saying, which is that is like pure perfect prediction.
But it's weird because I saw like of all the analysis I saw people doing online, I didn't see anyone mention that the fact that you've got an incomplete ring in one of these scenes and what that might mean. So
I don't know. Okay, let's get into the recap. We start off with a flashback telling us why Ciroc and his brother created Rehoboam to be a god who can save our world from self-destruction. And then he extorts the Brazilian president into ceasing his activities, which are enriching his friends by exploiting the common people. Mm-hmm. So this is interesting. It shades Ciroc as certainly a benevolent dictator, right? He's in there, and his reasons for that might not be particularly amazing or charitable, but he is doing things for the common people here in order to sort of keep this system on track.
Yeah, I mean that's the devil in the details. Like I would say he's certainly not a traditional evil character, but I
do think we get there by the end of this episode.
Or the fact that he might do something for the good of all mankind that mankind doesn't sign off on. You're taking people's agency and free will away. One of the interesting things that Westworld has been saying is that people don't have free will anyway. So if you take it from him, it doesn't really matter. It's more like you're not fucking with a human being. It's so much as moving a couple parts of a Rube Goldberg machine around and to get it, it's like, well, if your big elaborate mousetrap isn't catching mice, well, move the guy that dives into the bathtub an inch to the left. Who cares? It works better this way. And I don't know. That's like I said, I've said many times I don't find the worldview of Westworld very satisfying. And I feel like in season 3, they're starting to explore the discrepancy between the things that they've asserted and the real world. And I'm kind of waiting to see where they go with that.
I think there's definitely a distinction to be made between like manipulating people who are under the illusion of free will. And especially, when it relates to humans who may or may not have free will in the first place, versus taking people who are very much not under that illusion, which we see at the end of this episode, and putting them into a space where they're being manipulated. I think those are two fundamentally different things, which sort of keep Ciroc in this gray area between supervillain who you know is potentially dominating and enslaving the entire human race, or semi-benevolent dictator who is trying to do the right thing, given that humanity doesn't have free will anyway. It's a really interesting question.
I wanted to make a couple of things I noticed here in this first scene too. Like we talked about this on the instant take. Flies are a very big part of this first scene. You know, Ciroc talks about how they brought order from chaos and it began to fall apart. There's flies in the ointment. Then the president in Brazil is dealing with a very noticeable fly problem. We also know that flies were kind of used as a way to visualize the spread of this contagion of free will and identity and consciousness amongst the hosts. In previous seasons, did you give any more consideration to what that might mean? That's another thing I thought was pretty light on people's analysis when I was looking around.
Because honestly, it felt kind of light in the episode. It felt like this guy, this was literally just a visual way for them to say this guy is an anomaly. This guy is one of those
in ointment.
He's one of those people who's going to break the system if he's not dealt with.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all I got out of it. Did you have anything beyond that?
The other thing I noticed is I talked about this in Instant Take that I felt like they're drawing some pretty clear thematic parallels between Ciroc's brother and Bernard. Ciroc says that his brother is that sui generis, that one-of-a-kind individual. And Connells asserts that Bernard is the only one they can't replace. And
right.
Delores said last season that which is irreplaceable is real. Something real is something that's irreplaceable. I wonder where they're going with that. And also, I when I was looking around, I saw that Kim Renfro noticed in her analysis that there's a very prominent picture of a dead cow in that opening scene of the Ciroc brothers fleeing the destruction of Paris, and then that harkens back to the first time we meet Bernard in this season, him and analyzing this dead cow that might have its leg wrapped around barbed wire, might have its leg broken. Why are they drawing the parallels between those two characters?
Don't ask me questions I don't know the answer to.
I wonder.
Yeah, no, it's interesting though.
Yeah, the other thing I want to say about this, I had this really great theory about Rehoboam going back to the biblical story, and then it was kind of exploded by, speaking of Kim Renfro, her interview with Jonathan Nolan, where he said, she asked him about, we found out that like all the versions of Rehoboam were based, you had the first one was Saul, first king of Israel, then you had David, then you had Solomon, then you had Rehoboam, that's just going down the dynasty, if you're Charles Dance. And he said that was just a nod to another sci-fi series that he liked called I forgot what the name of it was. It's Return to Sennacherib or something. But where their AI that also was prominently displayed in the lobby of this giant multinational corporation was named after this ancient, I think, Syrian or Babylonian king. And he's like, this is just an homage to that. He might be lying, and if so, I think it's interesting that, like, if you recall when when I broke down the Rehoboam biblical story, Rehoboam took control of the kingdom of Israel. His father left him a very wealthy, powerful kingdom, but had some structural taxation problems. And he asked his advisors what he should do. And one set of advisors said, well, you should relax, should be kind to the people. You should give them some freedom and some breathing space, and then they will serve you the rest of their days. And then he went to another set of advisors and said, nah. You just pile it onto them more. You make them more oppressive. You pile on their burdens, and then they won't have any power to resist you. I think it's interesting that there seemed to be a big conflict between Ciroc and his brother about what to do with the information that Solomon and Rehoboam were giving them. And it seems like Ciroc chose a fairly brutalist approach, which is every round peg that can fit in the round hole is fine, but when you find a square peg, that has to be excluded and destroyed. And the people need to be put under more control. And that led to a fracturing of two kingdoms with two different kings. And I wonder if there's something there with two races of intelligent beings, one synthetic, one real, and a permanent fracturing of that society. because Ciroc chose the more harsh and oppressive approach rather than maybe the more libertarian, liberal approach that his brother might have suggested. But Jonathan Nolan himself says that's bullshit because he didn't intend any of these biblical allusions. So
I mean, it's tracking so closely though. Like you look at this because you can look at so Ciroc is kind of the one who wants to preserve Dempsey, right? Like his brother says, "Hey, we should kill him. He's not on board with our plan."
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of look at him as sort of the harsher of the two, whereas I look at Ciroc and I say, well, they're both Cirocs, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
I look at Aaron Guard or whatever his name is, and I say like he tried to take the gentler path. He was sort of, I guess, the Solomon to his brother's Rehoboam. But it's interesting because like there is something that comes after those two kings. Solomon, who pushed his people, but wasn't a brutal dictator. Rehoboam, who turned into that, and then there's Jeroboam afterward, who is kind of the leader chosen by the people, who sort of brought about a revolution, which you could kind of put that identity onto Delores at the moment. And you can see that there's a split of the two nations of the nation of Israel, right? After Jeroboam leads this revolution. So you can kind of see with the two worlds that we're getting at, with the human world and the host world, and Ciroc's sort of pitch as like, hey, we can all live together but apart, much like we're doing right now in our modern society. To sort of like say, okay, maybe he's the Jeroboam, maybe Delores is a Jeroboam, but there's definitely a Jeroboam in the mix. And so, like, how closely does this have to track with the story in the Bible before we say, bullshit, Jonathan Nolan, bullshit, we don't believe that you're not doing some allusion here to the biblical tale?
Yeah. I tend to not believe any showrunner of a mystery box who's giving a mid-season interview to people, like, he might, like, that might be the truth, that he was inspired by that, but like, that it ends there. He's got a vested interest in keeping his cards close to his vest and letting people, putting misleading or incomplete information out there. So,
and I would think any intelligent, curious writer would be more than tempted to sort of make these allusions and include allegory in the story, right?
Right.
Like,
even if it started just as like, hey, I'm just giving an homage and a nod to a favorite piece of work. I was like, oh, but look at all these similarities. Maybe we work some of that in. No, I agree. Yeah. I totally agree.
I did want to say there's a really good line at the end because we kind of got ahead of ourselves a little, but there's this really great line at the end of this Brazilian extortion where he says like, you're going to do all this or we're going to replace you with the president, and at the very end he asks, understood, which is awesome to me because he's speaking like 5 different languages in this scene, right? He's speaking French and English to this guy who speaks Portuguese,
right? So
like it's just this really, really cool thing, and it sort of lets you in on the idea that he's using this translator that's in his ear. I don't know how many people noticed that, but
it was very brief. I didn't see it the first time I watched it, but yeah, there's like a universal translator stuck in his ear canal.
And I thought that was like at first someone talking to him, but then I reconsidered and I was like, oh, this is just an artificial intelligence, right? This is just a language recognition and translator.
Yeah, it's like the Babel fish from Hitchhiker's Guide.
Yeah, pretty cool. So then we go to the flashback showing how the brothers hooked up with Dempsey and how he didn't see the brilliance in what they created. And in the present, Ciroc is informed that the anomaly in LA came from Liam Dempsey's private compound, and they have surveillance of Delores. I found it funny that Daddy Dempsey, I should just call him Dadsy, calls Rehoboam, or Solomon, I guess at that time, a giant steel ball sack, which is it being round? Is that the only qualification for it looking like a ball sack? Because it has no other identifiably ball sack qualities.
Dempsey didn't.
And if so, isn't his own fucking head a ball sack?
Yeah. Dempsey did not strike me as a particularly intelligent, insightful, or witty man. He seemed very venal, I think is the word I'm looking for. Not very impressive. Like, I mentioned this in Instant Take that like this guy establishes himself as a lightweight by decrying the fact that this thing could, from scratch, predict past events with perfect accuracy. Like, anyone that had half a brain should be able to be like, holy fuck, that is amazing. And then to only use it to benefit your pocketbook or to only use it to make money seems like a just profound bankruptcy of imagination. So like, yeah, I wonder like if that's like a not especially clever piece of verbal jujitsu is kind of part of his character.
And I feel like they're trying to say something about our technology companies and our current use of data collection and mining.
Yeah.
Because they say something in here about how he had been in the right place at the right time before the privacy laws. And I think
he's the Zuckerberg of his day.
Right. You should be asking yourself whether we're in the time and place before the privacy laws right fucking now.
Yeah.
And consider how that's going to affect the future of humanity and society.
Yeah. What are you sharing? What are, do you have a device on you that's as powerful as a supercomputer from 30 years ago that's literally tracking every move that you're making and every communication you're having and all the porn that you're watching and all of your bank account transfers and all your pictures and building a profile of who you associate with? I don't know. Yeah, we all do.
I do.
Yottabytes of information. Do you know how much a yottabyte is?
Is that one step beyond a petabyte, or is that even bigger?
It's bigger. It's 1 trillion terabytes.
1 trillion?
1 trillion.
Wow.
1 trillion terabytes.
So orders of magnitude bigger than
it's a terabyte of terabytes. It's pretty crazy amount. It's like almost a fictional amount of data. But that's how much stuff that they had collected up until that point. Yeah.
What I have no idea what, and I'm sure you can't answer this question off the top of your head, but what is the collective storage capacity of the entirety of the cloud as it stands right now?
Man, I don't know. We're way beyond, because like I remember like 20 years ago you could kind of talk about like libraries of Congress, like a DVD ROM, or like 5 DVD ROMs could hold the entirety of the Library of Congress. Like, we're so far beyond that. And then what is information? Is information like a movie script? Is information a standard resolution copy of that movie? Is it a Blu-ray copy? Is it like a 35? It's fuck. I don't know. Yeah,
it's all of it.
Yeah, it's a lot of data. I
got some other questions about the privacy laws too, because there's, I think, an implication here that
I was about to mention this. Yeah.
So first of all, before we get there, I just wanted to side note and say I think I understand why there are no cameras in this society, and it's every street is not blanketed completely with cameras that auto track your face and everything. It's because these privacy laws.
Yeah,
I think I was overlooking that earlier, but I think there's an implication in this scene that perhaps some of these privacy laws could have been engineered by Ciroc and his brother and Dempsey in order to sort of corner the market on the data that they already had.
Yeah.
So that no one could recreate a Rehoboam, right?
Yeah. That they went through, they're first through the door and then they slammed it shut and put a bunch of deadbolts on it. Right. I do wonder, because we know there are cameras and monitoring devices, because that's what the Ash's scrambling device does, is disable them. But I wonder if it's only allowed on private property, or something like that, because there's a couple points where she's like, oh, if we stand the move, they can't track us. I'm like, the fuck world are you living in, lady? But then on the second watch they make an explicit point that these privacy laws have changed the reality. I think I'm not sure how much to read into it, because it's almost like they realize they need this to happen, because otherwise you can't, 50 years in the future, the idea that you'd have a manhunt or someone be able to hide out from the law is almost absurd. It's almost absurd today. But just the fact that it's illegal to do that kind of monitoring,
which is very much the opposite direction of our current society's trajectory.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Europe is trying to push back. They got their they got their data privacy laws and the right to be forgotten and all that kind of stuff. So they're kind of at the forefront.
Yeah. All right, let's talk about Delores and Caleb discussing what they need, which is Liam's access. Liam insists that he's not going to help them, and he tries to get inside Caleb's head. This is all happening sort of in this long tunnel, which sort of is a motif throughout this episode. Caleb stops to set him straight, but instead he gets dosed with genre, and weird visuals start happening here pretty soon.
Oh, one thing I wanted to point out before we moved on from the last scene, or maybe we skipped the scene with Ciroc and his private jet, is his assistant said that they found connections between encrypted devices in Jakarta, Berlin, San Francisco, and New Orleans. Or, I'm sorry, Los Angeles. Yeah. It seems like they're that mysterious other aspect of Delores that's running around there might be operating out of Germany. And I guess I would be suspecting that we'd be going to Germany before the season's over, because that's the only. I mean, I guess Jakarta is a location we haven't seen as well. But I thought maybe that would be connected to the Yakuza activity. But I don't know. Yeah. I just want to be on the lookout for German locations to see that mysterious last final version of Delores, her ultimate form, to be revealed.
Yeah, I think we absolutely should keep an eye on that.
Do you want to bitch about genre all up front? Because I feel like genre was a very cool concept that they just didn't do anything with. Like, it was just like, hey, wouldn't it be cool? Like, you know what? I liked Willy Wonka's 3-course candy. I liked these various movies and moods, and I want to pay homage to them. But they didn't. You know, there was nothing romantic about the romantic part. There was nothing especially horrific about the horror genre. There was nothing. I mean, the action genre, woof. I just felt like it's a neat concept, but it just didn't pay off. And as you said, it's unfortunate that HBO kind of upstaged itself with Watchmen, because they had a similar concept pay off with the nostalgia drug paid off a Yottabyte more than than this version.
Yeah, absolutely. I find one thing interesting, which Marshawn Lynch says in this episode. He says, watch out for that last act. Is the last act reality? Is it the come down?
I think well, see, that's the thing. But then they continue after that. I thought so too. On the second watch, I'm like, okay. But then they'd start up the horror movie, the Shining shit at the beach. Yeah. So, because I'm like, well, that's kind of neat that, like, you know, watch out for that last act, which is essentially the come down, the go back to reality. But there wasn't any, like, Caleb didn't feel like hit rock bottom, or maybe he did when he started reiterating through his, like, flashbacks and maybe uncovering his dark past and, like, the fact that he might have killed his best friend and who knows what else. I don't know. Like I said, it's like, you know, maybe 2-3 episodes we'll look back and be like, oh, that genre actually is pretty interesting. But it's like, sucks that I don't have the information to appreciate and integrate it at the same time, you know? So
yeah. No, I feel you. Is there something weird about this scene with that's just poor editing, or are they trying to do some simulation thing? Because there is a very strange cut. There's the stuff where Liam doses Caleb and then runs off, and he's clearly 30 yards ahead, 50 yards ahead of where Delores is. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of focused on Caleb, and everything's going blurry with genre. And then there's a cut, and suddenly Liam is being pulled back in, and, like, we know that Delores can run pretty fast, but it just seemed off. And I know a lot of people are talking about simulation theory.
Yeah, one of our listeners actually Steve sent in an email having the exact same question. And I don't know, because, number one, Caleb just got dosed by this drug and he's processing that. She walks up to him and walks past him, and you do hear her subduing Liam. So it's like, it could just be the effect of the drug compressing time. We see that it slows down and speeds up time at various other parts, like when he's standing in the middle of a gunfight and he's, you know, falling in love with Delores during the romantic period of the genre. I just don't know. But you're right. Like, it could also be an indication that something's not right. Something has been shifted. There's a glitch in the matrix as well.
Sure. All right, we continue across town as Caleb experiences the effects of the drug. Delores verifies that some explosives are on her bike, and then they get in a rideshare. It's, of course, immediately pulled over. because that's what you do with automated vehicles. Men with guns approach, and Liam decides he's going to give up his private access key to reactivate the car. There's a chase and a subsequent shootout, and Caleb's friends show up, and they continue moving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we talked about the bad action here. I don't want to belabor it. Although I will say I think one of the things contributing to it is, unfortunately, that these are electric vehicles, and there isn't the sound of the engines. There isn't that kinetic energy is sort of dulled by just the auditory experience of this. Like Cybertruck chases are going to be super boring in the future.
I don't know that's true, because the thing about the electric vehicles, they're capable of insane acceleration.
Yes.
And
not in this show, but in real life.
It's not so much the vroom, vroom that I'm missing, but just the sense of speed. Like, you know, when I see a car drift around a corner and peel out, I expect to see like some rate of acceleration. But at no time did it ever feel like these cars were moving faster than 30 miles an hour. And I don't know if that was a technical problem where they essentially did build this thing on a... I mean, I saw the behind episode where they essentially... A lot of these things built these on top of trailers that they were towing around. But then in the scenes where it's like they were actually operating as vehicles, maybe they just didn't have the tech to make them go like that fast, because these are very minimalist vehicles. Like, where are the batteries? Where are the engines?
On a Tesla.
I don't think they had the room, because like this, like I said, these things were they did sell the futuristic part of it. They're also, do you buy that they're bulletproof?
I mean, the show's telling me that, sure.
Yeah, I guess in the far future, like, why wouldn't you make a taxi? Like, if you got, you know, really advanced polymer technology and you can do it for cheap, why
Well, it
not?
almost feels like the rich are the ones who take these vehicles, because nobody's on the streets, right? Everybody's on the underground subway, on the train. Yeah. So I kind of get the impression that, like, the rich are the people who use these cars.
I feel like the rich are the ones using the Skycat and the
I mean, the mega rich are
cars.
Certainly.
Okay, so yeah,
there's probably like a distinction.
The middle class millionaires in the future, sure.
Yeah. But maybe I'm wrong about that.
One thing before we move into this collection that we kind of glossed over is the level of freaking out that Liam did when he got a look at Caleb through his glasses.
Yeah.
And then at several points, like, you know, towards the end, he'll say, "You're the worst of them all." That is, you know, obviously underlining that we should pay attention to Caleb. We don't know Caleb. And it's also starting to make me think that there's a lot more to his mother's backstory. Like when she says, "You're not my son," she might not actually be lying. This might be like part of his manufactured backstory, I don't know. Like the more I think about it, the more there is a lot of evidence for him being host, like this tragic backstory that he's tied to, keeping him on his loop. There's other things. That, like when she takes a bullet for him, that I'm going to talk about, but I just wanted to talk about that too.
Okay. Let's move over to Delores saying that they can't stop moving or Ciroc will find them. And she calls up Martin, who's with Bernard, to get Rehoboam's data on Ciroc. Martin sends it over and then explains what Rehoboam is to Bernard. It's essentially a prediction machine. He questions what Delores wants with the system and whether Martin has questioned it. And Delores gets the Ciroc file sent to her as they board the train.
Yep. And you hit the night clubbing genre. I'm not sure what genre this is. The train, I guess I heard this is supposed to be an homage like Train Spotting.
Okay.
Because they're on a train.
I've never seen Train Spotting.
Me either.
I know.
Me either. It's one of the... Yeah, I know. It's one of those like big... yeah, it's like kind of shameful to admit, but I haven't seen Train Spotting.
So the Bernard stuff was interesting to me. Because I think it sort of retroactively explains the scene we saw with Maeve and Ciroc last episode, where she was in this fancy restaurant, and I didn't realize, I guess, that hosts could sort of move around and function pretty normally when they were offline. But we clearly see Bernard doing that in this episode.
There's also a key thing where Connell's Colores says of Bernard that you've always been of two minds. Is that a hint that, you know, because there's some people's been saying that, you know, Ford's been riding along and Bernard like an armored Uber. Is there?
He certainly has at some point.
But also, it's like it makes you think of the marble, the two-tone marble, which is a modeled mix of human and AI. Like, are they literally referring that he is a successful human AI hybrid? Are they referring to the fact that he has Arnold and this other distinct personality, Bernard, within him? Is there other something special about him that makes him irreplaceable? I I don't know, but these would I just want to point out all these hints that they're giving that the Bernard's special and he's more than he appears.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's an interesting question whether Martin O'Connell or whatever his last name is has ever questioned whether Dolores' intentions are exactly what she says they are, because this person, Martin, has been Delores since she was created, right? Like, there was a point where it diverged. However, that point is super interesting, especially in the context of Bernard, because we know that Bernard is actively worried about whether or not Delores fucked with him and his programming. And so what makes Martin think that she wouldn't have done something similar to him? And that he is, in fact, some kind of pure copy of Delores. There's really no reason to think that.
Oh, I guess because I was thinking, like, well, but if she split her consciousness off at some point, the information that she would that plot that she would have inside her would be part of that split information. But I guess if she went back and edited selectively the information, and maybe that's why one of the copies of Delores is acting particularly strange and crazy. Yeah, that definitely has some merits. Why is Delores wanting to download Ciroc's profile? Has he never been to Westworld? Made it a point never to go to Westworld?
Yeah, it seems like he probably hasn't. But he's, a complete enigma. He's not on any of the traditional informational systems they have. So this is really the only place she can get information on that man. And he's the one actively trying to kill her.
Related question. Why does Ciroc want the Westworld data? It seems like he had enough data just with what they had before they shut the privacy laws down to accurately predict the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And they knew they had divergences, or they knew they had these individuals that didn't fit the mold, and they had a plan to deal with them. Why did he want the Westworld data? Did he think that does he think there's a key to dealing with those outliers that's not just killing them off in that Westworld data? Or
could be. Yeah, with all the experiments he's doing, which we're going to get into here in a second.
Or does he think there's a cure for whatever the problem with his brother is in that data? I thought that, like, Rehoboam maybe was like one step away from being able to simulate the future and like guide everything. It doesn't seem like that's true. Or I don't know. Maybe he's wanting to eliminate these little windows of opportunity of free will and these moments of agency. And those are the holes he's wanting to plug with the Westworld data. But I don't know. It just seems like Rehoboam's got such a comprehensive handle on the present and the predictive analysis until, Delores throws the monkey wrench in. It's like, why did they want that data? Why did they need that extra data? Why is he so desperate to get it?
It might be simply to take an advantage away from Delos. They're in a hostile relationship at the moment. Insight and Delos, and so
he wants to keep them from competing against Robo-Hobo.
Right. Yeah, I could see that. It is an advantage they have over him. I think, honestly, more useful than the human data from Westworld would be the host data at this point.
Why is that?
Like, try and perfect your Robo-Hobo system, right? Like,
oh, yeah.
Take the anomalies that you can't predict currently and try and develop a model around that.
Yeah, simulate all. And that might actually what he's doing with Maeve. I noticed that if you look at the week ahead on Westworld, they're showing Maeve back in the war world.
Right.
So we're still in simulation. That's another thing I picked up on the second time through when we were looking at Ciroc in his sky, Invisible Woman jet, or the Wonder Woman's invisible jet. That his guy said that he made a statement about they're analyzing the data that came out of the Yakuza incident, but they don't mention anything about Maeve or anything like that, implying that that didn't happen, or they didn't know Maeve was there, or Maeve wasn't there, or I mean, maybe that's common. Like maybe that would be seen as belaboring the point. But I thought it was interesting that like the way that guy talked about it was almost like the Maeve mission. They had no idea that was going on. And I wonder if that was another hint that what we saw Maeve do last week was not real or was simulated or is from some other timeline that hasn't occurred yet.
That certainly could be the case. It could just also be that like since they're the ones who kind of sanction that mission, it's not worth noting, or it kind of comes as a package with the Yakuza stuff.
Yeah, I guess that's what I was thinking. Like, you know, what would be unusual for this guy to report? Like if, you know, it's right. Like and Maeve was there too. Well, of course she was. We sent her there, idiot.
Right.
So
then we flash back to when they demonstrated Solomon's effectiveness to Dempsey Sr. He's duly impressed, but he still didn't understand the full scope of it. And Ciroc and his brother charted a course for the entire human race. Dempsey got greedy, manipulating the system for his own ends, so they locked him out of it. And then Ciroc realized his brother was an outlier that broke the system, and his brother went mad.
Did he? Or was his brother the sane one?
That's a good question. He's quick to suggest murder, so not a huge fan of Ciroc's brother.
There's a couple other people that said that, you know, Ciroc talks about how they've done millions of simulations, and there's no simulation where if you reveal the truth about Robo-Hobo, it doesn't end in human extinction. But someone suggested on Reddit, it's like, what if the Robo-Hobo only simulates realities in which it continues to exist? Like maybe the solution is to turn off Robo-Hobo.
Gotcha.
It's like unable to think outside itself, like, or ponder its own inexistence, which is kind of a human
perspective is limited.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think there's nothing predictive about that theory. It's just an interesting one I wanted to raise.
Huh. Okay. Yeah, I hadn't considered it. And it is interesting. I don't know how much more we want to talk about here because we kind of talked about a lot of this.
Yeah, I'm fine with moving on.
Okay. We go back to the present day or simulation. Who knows? Delores decides she's going to release the data that Rehoboam has to everyone. Liam objects and tries to demonstrate to Caleb's friends exactly why it's such a bad idea by looking at their data and telling them things about themselves and their loved ones that they'd rather not hear. Caleb then tells a story about drowning rats meant to demonstrate the false hope that Rehoboam represents. And then Delores distributes Rehoboam's data anyway to everyone on the planet. And we see everybody freak the fuck out as they exit the station.
Right. So John Gallagher, the actor that plays Liam, is he bad, or is the way Caleb or the way Liam here is just thrashing from one version of asshole to the next, to pleading for his life, to being petulant, to being angry, to being is that suggesting that we're seeing multiple versions of reality being simulated and played out before us? Because there's a couple things that they beg that, like one of Caleb's accomplices at some point says, you know, hey, you got the glasses. Is there any version of this where you talk yourself out of it, whatever? Because like, if this is just one, these are some bizarre choices that they're making as far as like him being under these people's thumb, and he taunts them, he belittles them, and not even in the situation at the beach where he's essentially like, okay, well, my name's Pitt and you're not talking your way out of it. But like, I feel like he had some hope in this train scene that he could talk himself out of it, but he always went maximum fucking dick. Does that just show a limitation of his type, that he doesn't know how to really connect with people? But then the next scene he's talking about like, but hope is what makes the whole world go. Like, I don't know. I don't know whether it's bad writing, bad acting, or they're actually intentionally showing that there's various versions that's being iterated through here.
I'm not inclined to give them a lot of slack when it comes to the emotional tone of this show.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have shown time and again that that's not their main focus. Mm-hmm. Their main focus is conceptual. And so I'm inclined to sort of say, yeah, it's probably just poor direction, poor writing. I think this guy plays a very specific character really well. And if he tries to get too far out of the wheelhouse, I can't even say because I haven't seen him try anything
I was
else.
going to say, I've only seen him play a very similar character in the Newsroom, and I thought he was kind of shaky there too. But then again, that's another show that was pretty shaky in its writing and some of its foundational stuff too.
Yeah, in places certainly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I view him as like being very good at playing a specific character, like a Jason Statham or something, right?
Do you think he's so you're saying like not that he's good at playing characters like Jason Statham, but he's very
no. Much like Jason Statham, he is very good at playing a single type of character.
Got you. He's like yeah. All right.
Yeah. We do find out that Liam thought Martin killed Delores, which kind of adds another level of oh fuck to this character. Because I guess I thought that like he was just told she died in an accident or something, but no, he kind of knew she was murdered, which turns out she wasn't, obviously.
Yeah.
And I think I agree with Caleb here, where I would rather live in chaos as opposed to a false hope given to him by the likes of Liam.
Yeah.
Because, and honestly, it comes back to this question I had of like, how unethical is it or immoral is it to sort of give people false hope when they don't know that the hope is false versus once they know that the hope is false, how unethical is it to put them back into those cages? And I think I'm with Caleb by the end of this episode. Yeah,
it's very like opiate of the masses, right? This is the ultimate, like religion skirts around this because most of the people that are teaching it, like you got clear exceptions. Like I don't know. I doubt there's many fans of like mega church TV evangelist pastors who are clear, like it seems like that's clearly someone abusing religious belief to enrich themselves. But most people that are preachers, priests, ministers sincerely believe what they're teaching, and whether their hope is false or not, and whether there's only one God and you got to follow that particular version or whatever, it's still like done in good faith, right? Versus like if you got the L. Ron Hubbard engineering Scientology deliberately to enrich himself and be in control, that's a lot harder. It's different from a person being mistaken and wrong but sincere, and a person being cynical and manipulative on purpose to achieve a particular goal against someone's actual informed consent. But
and the beliefs in their own head too. Like, does the person doing the manipulation believe in free will? That can sort of convey innocence or guilt to them. Because if they do believe in free will and they're manipulating these people anyway, that's a much greater sin, in my opinion, than not believing that anyone has free will, themselves included.
Because that's like what they're doing is just they can't be blamed any more than a mousetrap can be blamed for killing a mouse. It's like it's just
right.
I was put on here to make Rehoboam, and that's what I'm going to do. And if I'm not meant to do it, someone else will stop me. It's a very fatalistic, like, I don't know how you get out of bed with that kind of worldview, but there it is.
And this sort of goes back to the idea I had after, I think, the instant take of last week, which was sort of, who cares if we have free will or not until we have the ability to determine the outcome of our choices and determine whether that's a truth or a falsehood.
Yeah.
It kind of doesn't matter, and I think we're sort of in that place where it's interesting at Westworld because they've sort of said, and they want us to just take on the face of it, that humans don't have free will, and so it paints these people manipulating others as much more villainous.
Yeah, I agree, and it's not just whether we can do a prediction, but also the certainty to which. Like, for example, if I'm 99% certain to die in a particular situation, like I'm in a natural disaster, or I'm in some kind of, trying to escape a forest fire. Some people would say, well, like 99% chance to die, just lay down now and quit. And then there's the person that's like, fuck, 1% chance, I'm going to keep fighting. It feels like that, like, you should live your life as if you have free will and your choices matter, because if you're right, then that's the best way to live. And if you're wrong, then it doesn't matter. It's kind of like a very abstract, or Pascal's wager with extra steps. But it seems compelling to me. And like I said, I think the life is like, it's so funny because when Ciroc was saying like, life is on rails, but there are these moments of clarity and action and potentials, that felt like a lot like what I was saying last week, where it's like, I think the day to day we are essentially biomechanical engines doing our tasks, but we can, with this emergent quality called consciousness, affect our own states by, we can improve our diet, we can improve our exercise, we can meditate, we can overcome some of our limitations, will then feed back into and alter the probabilities of our outcomes. So yeah, I pat myself on the back for my philosophy.
It's sort of an admission of guilt by Ciroc in a way, right?
It
the
is,
idea
right?
that there are moments where you can make truly free choices and exert some agency on your life.
But it's a very utilitarian.
That shades what he's doing as villainous.
It's the trolley problem writ large. Like, I've got a switch that I can throw and kill 500 million people, but it will save 8 billion. Is it moral to throw that switch, or is it more moral to stand back and not touch that switch and say, well, it's out of my hands? Right. We got a lot of real life trolley problems right now that we're dealing with, but I think that's kind of like from a utilitarian ethical framework. He's saying that it would be immoral to allow the world to be destroyed and all 8 billion people die, and if you have to sacrifice a few 100 billion to achieve a goal where they all get, where the majority of us get to live, then that's ethical and that's moral.
And I think Caleb's on the other side of that, right? Which is why he's helping Delores out in the first place. But
because how certain like are you of extinction? Because that's the other thing, is like, what if these simulations are wrong? What if Rehoboam hasn't seen the one simulation where humanity decides to eke out an existence, however meager, however strong, but free and genuine and real. And something of their own choice and volition, that's an interesting ethical problem too. Like, would it be better off if 99% of the world lives in mental bondage and slavery, kind of like a Matrix situation, or would it be better for 1% of the world to survive, but as free thinking individuals of free will? Fuck, yeah. I'm not qualified to do that math.
No, I don't want to.
Right.
Like, take that job from my shoulders. I don't want it.
Yeah.
So I want to say how little this emotionally connected with me, how this moment rang completely false, given how sterile this world is, given how few people we've seen, and how emotionally disconnected the show has been. I don't want to belabor that point, but I will say there is one true hero among the ranks here, and it's the fucking janitor on that subway platform who just keeps mopping away.
Hey, man, yeah.
He sees his thing. Maybe he saw and it was like future CEO of Insight 10 to 12 years or something.
Yeah,
I don't know what he saw, but it was a good day for him.
It seemed like everyone was reacting negatively, but I don't know, because the second time I watched this, I was reminded of a very similar scene in Mr. Robot from last season, and I remember being critical of that too. Like, really, that's it? But I don't know how you depict the world simultaneously getting some kind of like jaw-dropping information, and especially when you don't, like a show like The Leftover, that would be the point. The Leftovers, that would be the point. Like, you would track everyone's reaction to getting a cell phone, and some would be incredulous. Oh, this is bullshit. This is fake news. I don't believe it. Some people would be like, aha, I knew it. Some people would be in denial. Some people, like you'd have seasons to work through this one defining moment. Where in Westworld, it's like, in Westworld, it's like, fuck it. We got 5 minutes. We're going to be on the train, and people are going to be like arguing and crying. There's going to be a boyfriend and girlfriend breaking up, and then we're going to get out of the tunnel, and there's going to be people fucking crowd surfing on Ubers and shit, and smashing windows and instantly going black mask and burning it all down. Like,
I got a solution for you.
Yeah,
change your story. If you realize you don't have the time, or you don't have the budget, or you don't have whatever you need to get this done right, don't do it.
But it's a cool concept, and like, if you can, so if the concept is sound that you just can't sell it in 5 minutes, then you just realize that's a weakness. Like, that's why I can never write a Hollywood story, because it's impossible to write a story that has 0 holes and 0 leaps of logic. And usually when I get there, it's a shortcut. I think successful people, like, yeah, fuck it. If I do everything else right, people won't notice. And I think that's what Westworld, for a lot of people, does enough stuff right that they don't care or notice about the little stuff.
Yeah,
so
not for me.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, if they're selling a tale of like, now what's the important part is to realize is now Robo Hobo has something that it cannot simulate, which is people knowing that It's giving them rotten inputs and outputs and false rewards, so people will no longer participate in the system. It's going to have to build up a whole other theoretical framework for this stuff now. And I mean, I don't know, because it does seem like there's a lot of obvious counterplays. Like we mentioned in Instant Podcast, why couldn't you instantly put something out to the world's media that says, oh, this was just a hoax, this was just a terrorist attack trying to destabilize people's confidence in the system? The vast majority of people that this has benefited and they're providing a comfortable real existence to would probably go along with that. And then the small the percentage of the people that don't, you just put into the retraining camps. You send them off to war. You do something with them, whatever you do to wean them out of society.
Yeah, I'm sure Rehoboam has anticipated this. Like every scenario, they say every scenario in which this information is revealed ends in the collapse of the system. And so it's clearly been trying to simulate it. But there are so many outliers and so many anomalies at this point in the form of, people who are now aware and also hosts.
That can't be simulated, yeah.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, how accurate are those simulations?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Bernard gets to see what Delores did from Rehoboam's control center, and Delores gets shot a few times, and Caleb's surprised that she's fine.
Okay. One of these bullets at least goes right through her.
I know.
Is this another hint that we're dealing a simulation thing? And she kind of looks at his chest as if maybe he's got a bullet hole in him too. And is this a simulation? Is Caleb actually a host? And he's just like looks down and sees the bullet hole in his chest. Like, that doesn't look like anything to me.
I don't know, because they've done action so poorly in this show that I really can't tell what is just them ignoring the consequences of their own action scenes versus them trying to make a point.
The other thing is this the point where Caleb realizes he's being manipulated? Because the first time he meets Delores, she's dying of, apparently dying of multiple gunshots to the stomach. Here she takes 3 of them like a champ and doesn't even slow down.
I think it is. It's a combination of both.
But then again, she did seem like she was on the verge of dying, and she got a blood transfusion and felt right as rain. There again, really wish I knew what could hurt a host. What was mortal damage?
I think we'll find out this episode. Okay, let's talk about the next scene because it's more interesting. Ciroc is pissed that Delores released the data, and we flash back to when Dempsey discovered that Ciroc is imprisoning and experimenting on the Outliers in order to keep the system running and to keep Rehoboam from sending them out to be slaughtered. So there is a little bit of benevolence here, right? Like Rehoboam was sort of doing some real dirty work, sending them out to war, sending them out to other places to get chewed up by the meat grinder.
Yeah.
Ciroc's trying to do something else with them, trying to find a way to reintegrate them.
So when I first saw this, I thought that they were implying that these people were all going to eventually be shipped off to war, but it seems like this is 2.0 of the plan. The first one was like send them off to conflict theaters to get them, to get them killed. And then the kinder, gentler approach was to try to re-educate or fix them. I don't know what they're doing. It's such a weird facility. They got people in all these glass boxes, and they're having to make their beds and to like military perfection, and like what the hell? I wish I knew what they were doing. I have no idea what they're doing. They're trying to change
a re-education camp.
Well, and it's also Dempsey, who I was conditioned to expect is like dumb as a brick, like instantly grasps what's going on here just by walking through it. And I'm like, shouldn't I? Yeah. Like if you went into a building and they're like slitting people's throats and putting them on hooks like something out of Cloud Atlas, like that's something I can get instantly. And that's bad, that's sinister. But a whole bunch of people Dempsey could have been in here and been like, oh, you're sheltering and all the homeless people of the city, and it would just as fit as something nefarious, like you're remanufacturing their brains. Like I don't know, I can't figure out what is the deal here.
Yeah. I swear I've seen this style of thing very recently in some other show. It might have been a Black Mirror episode, like these glass boxes or people bring experiments on, but I can't think of the show.
Let me float one by you.
Yeah.
Is this the world above versus the world below version of Westworld's QA labs? Because
So
QA was
like
all black and, dark and dimly lit. And this is all very, everything's in white and neutral shades and more warm or organic, but there's still people in glass boxes being fucked with.
Mm-hmm.
So that's we're all the way up now in our deluxe mental institutions, Jimbo. Yeah, I don't know.
Ciroc's all the way up in his glass box.
He is.
Throughout this episode. All right, let's move on to Martin giving Bernard the location of the facility where Ciroc is keeping the Outliers. Then Stubbs shows up and they turn the tables on Martin, taking back Bernard's pause button.
Yeah, someone pointed out, and that this apparently is the not just any facility, but also the exact same facility that William's being was sent to.
Is that true? How do we know that?
I don't know. It was like a screenshot comparing something to something else. That was the assertion made, and that was like one of the things I looked at right before we got onto this Discord session to record the podcast. So I didn't get a chance to plumb it fully, but it seems like I bought that it's true because it's something that brings William back to the main narrative. It's a breadcrumb that leads, and it also makes sense in that, like, it's part of my theory that Delores is now the hero and Bernard's the villain. For Bernard to hook up with the other traditional villain of the show.
And we did see some stuff in the trailer where William is taken into a lab and he's got an implant put in. You could sort of see them trying to retrain him and recondition him with the limbic system implant. And the lab looks very much like the aesthetic of this entire building. So
yeah, agreed.
I can see that. Okay, so then Ciroc's goons show up and Bernard and Stubbs decide to flee to safety. The rest of them go into Martin's office to speak with Ciroc's hologram, and Martin blows up everyone in the room. As Bernard leaves the building, he remarks to Stubbs that Delores' plan is starting, and he thinks he's part of it. So I think now we have a definitive answer to what kills a host, right? Is Martin dead?
Explosion.
I hope Martin's dead. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the Angela thing. Like, if you get blown the fuck up, like atomized, I'll buy that that kills the host.
Yeah. So there are probably 5 hosts now.
Yeah.
Including Bernard.
Yeah, we're down to 4 Doloreses.
Yeah. One of which I don't think we've seen yet.
Mm-hmm. The one that's hanging out in Germany.
Yep. How does Bernard think he's part of it? What is the genesis of this sentiment? Because I'm not totally sure.
That's the mystery. That's the mystery. That's the mystery, right?
Yeah.
Like why? What? Connell's role is finished. What's Bernard's role? Why is he the one that they can't replace? Did you also see that someone pointed out that one of Ciroc's goons that's standing right behind his main goon, his female, his woman representative,
Martel?
Did you see that he was a host in season 2?
No.
Do you remember the one scene that they're making this guy out of the in the host frame, and he's like all white, and then they inject like the blood fluid into him and he gradually turns pink? Do you remember that scene from season 2? Uh-huh. That is like almost certainly the same actor as this guy standing behind her. And, people are going back and forth in the subreddit discussing this, saying, look, that's got to be a connection versus, well, it's not uncommon to reuse extras that are reliable. But that's like, this has hit the same stage as Mr. Robot, where like everything an anomaly in the background is cited as evidence. But we also know that this is also a real production that can make mistakes and continuity errors. And certainly, Mr. Robot had its share of unintentional weird shit that was just a production error and people went on of tangents. I'm going to assume that because why would you put that in the background and then blow the guy up 5 seconds later? I bet he's just, he showed up on time. He didn't hog the craft service table, and he hit his marks. So they called him back for season 3.
I like it.
We got another mook for you to play.
All right. Delores' group walks up on the beach, headed for the airfield, and she asks Caleb what he wants to do with Liam. He's seen it already. Liam has his own death. That's what they're going to do with him. He goes on a tirade against the entire group for being a drag on the system until Ash finally shoots him. Then Caleb tries to save him, but he's flashing back too hard because, genre. So he can't be of any use. And Liam's dying words to him are, "You did it."
What all has he done? I'm pretty sure just the juxtaposition of him standing over his friend Francis and trying to stem the wound and him standing over Liam, I think that all is suggesting that he is, and in fact, is the one that killed his friend. But also, it also seems clear that Caleb doesn't have a full knowledge of what exactly he did. Like, they show him black bagging this other gentleman that we don't know, we've never seen before. And with Francis maybe killing him, we also see him strapped to a gurney and thrashing around with these like high-tech goggles strapped to his face, which suggests to me like he's being reprogrammed or his memories are being fucked with. And then also, as we point out in the instant take, there's a lot of weirdness in this, the way the scene, like they implied, the way this thing is filmed implies that Ash is the one that shoots him, and but the angle that she's holding the gun and the place where he's shot, and what, Dempsey himself is saying maybe implies that Caleb did it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, there's also a lot of people pointed out that there's a eerie similarity between the overhead shot of Caleb standing over Liam and the white foam washing over and mixing with the blood with the scene of Maeve dying in the white android milk from 2 episodes ago. Or maybe that was last episode.
It was.
That might just be a nice visual motif tie-in, which I think is cool, but I just want to point that out for people as well.
Yeah, another possibility for You Did It is sort of a grander one, which is you're the thing that finally crashed the system. Because, all of these possibilities are simulated, right? But until one is sort of picked out, until you get down that line, you can't know which one. Oh, well, maybe that's not even true for Rehoboam. We saw stock market scene. But we do know that Liam had some insight into who Caleb was. And, there's the outlier or the anomaly of Delores sort of pushing events along here. But now that he's a part of that, maybe the system is able to predict him a little bit better. And it turns out maybe he's the one who crashes the whole system.
What if we go from the other direction and that incident with his mother at the diner was like some kind of formative thing for Rehoboam to like form a simulation? Because we know that was like right. They mentioned that's like that was right before the data privacy laws went into effect.
Yeah, it's one of his cornerstones.
Yeah, I wonder if there's some connection there with like that was that the way that situation unfolded and how maybe Robohobo had his mom committed, and that was like his first kind of like tweaking of society. And there could be that like he's saying you did this, like you're the one that started the Robohobo project, or you're connected to it somehow. I don't know. That's just something I'm throwing out there.
Yeah. It's meant to be cryptic.
Yes.
We'll see more in the future.
But we know that Liam asserts that Caleb's the worst of them.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Seb Sheneb.
The Destroyer.
All right. So Ciroc is told that Delores has his files. We flash back to when Ciroc kills Dempsey to keep him from revealing his experiments to the public, thereby resulting in the end of humankind.
Are we sure that Ciroc is talking to Robohobo this whole episode? Because I saw some interpretations of people trying to reframe it like that he was talking. This is like him talking to Delores, or it's like an interpretive thing of him like Delores looking at his files through his voice, or maybe he's talking to Maeve that that there's a collaboration with him and Ford to bring about Maeve to destabilize the situation. Or like if you go with my theory, which I didn't seem like there's a lot of people buying it, or this usually a lot of times when I have a smart idea, I'll go on Reddit the next day and there's a whole bunch of people had it too. I had the idea that Rehoboam actually is in some way Ciroc's brother.
Yeah.
Like his consciousness is uploaded in that, or it's his personality or something. I don't know. I don't feel like there's that had much legs to stand on. No one built anything onto that.
Yeah, I mean, we might just need more information on that.
But yeah, I didn't know, because like I don't understand why Ciroc would narrate this thing to Robohobo. I don't understand stylistically, and I don't understand like in real life what the explanation would be. So I was looking for
Yeah, I
something
feel you.
else.
No, it's weird. It doesn't seem like it. The dialogue makes it certainly seem like he's talking to Rehoboam as opposed to Dolores, especially in this scene. I think there's a moment where he says like we ensured, like I ensured in that moment that you would outlive us all.
Right, you'd survive.
And he's very much talking about like the system that he's created, and
Yep.
through the whole episode, not necessarily what you could look at as a byproduct of that system. That's not even true. Like the true outliers here are the hosts, and so like they're the
But
furthest removed from this system possible, right?
and that's not even true because apparently Ciroc himself is an outlier. Like
That's interesting. I almost think he made himself an outlier in this moment of random action.
I wonder if there's something that too, because like Dempsey Senior was saying something like, "Yeah, you're full of shit. I've looked through the glasses and I walk out of here alive." And he's like, "Oh yeah, well every once in a while you get to do something like this." Also, right. That's a very sloppy crime scene, right? Like a plane goes down and the guy bashes his brains out on the rudder of the down plane. Like the air safety guys show up and be like, "Oh, open and shut case. Look at this."
He's dragging him off at the end of this scene, so maybe he's gonna
clean up the crime scene a little bit. I don't know. It seemed like a clumsily
gonna
fake.
Stage it.
Yeah, it seems like a clumsily fake thing. But then again, there's been a lot of clumsy stuff in this show, so I might be spinning my wheels against nothing there. But I'm wondering where these other bubbles of agency, like how often do they exist? Are they trying to eliminate them? Is it just an inherent part of? And also, that also implies that the central thesis of the show is wrong, that people can't change, that people are on loops. If there are these moments, these anomalies that'll give you those windows of opportunity, then we do have free will and we can exercise it.
I feel like the opportunity here, the moment of free will, is not that. The moment of agency is sort of the accident itself, because how do you predict a mechanical failure that would crash an airplane, right?
What do you...
I don't know that a system like Rehoboam could predict a mechanical failure.
Why couldn't it?
Because it's just so up to chance. I mean, maybe I'm fooling myself. Maybe like it could, analyze the materials that the bolts are made out of on the wing, and it would know when they're going to fail exactly. Maybe it's some kind of magic like that, but I would think accidents, things that have a freak chance of happening, things that it sort of can't predict because it's not like a perfect
you're right, because
it
can't possibly predict the entire like you can't quantumly predict the entire universe and every particle in it, right?
It's physically impossible.
Yeah,
right?
like could it predict an asteroid coming that like science hasn't even observed yet? Like something like that.
Right.
Could it?
Once it got a glimpse of it, it could probably like tell you what's going to happen after that.
Sure, if you postulate, an asteroid's going to hit now, it could tell you like what the response would be. But you're right. Like random acts of God, like lightning strikes and stuff, fires. Like how can it possibly predict that?
Yeah, I would think that maybe the moment of agency he's talking about is the engineered moment of agency of the plane crash. Like Rehoboam couldn't possibly know that your plane was going to go down, and so now that it has gone down. Because of my doing, I may also be a black box into which
but
it
how did
look.
So do you buy that Ciroc is unknowable to Rehoboam either deliberately or accidentally? If so, that's it. Yeah. That's if the most powerful person in the world is the one thing that Robo-Hobo can't simulate, that seems like a massive hole in its information space.
And I'm kind of convincing myself that that's not true, because Ciroc's files, his memories, his
they're in there.
Flashbacks are in Rehoboam.
His cognitive profile. Yeah.
Yeah. I think he does have himself in the machine here.
Plus, I think I don't think he's evil in the sense that he's twirling his mustache and wanting to enslave humanity. I think he sees himself as good and noble, and I think he would understand the importance of even himself, the man kind of like behind the curtain, being simulated, because else what's the point? If Robo-Hobo doesn't know what string he's going to pull, then how the hell can it tell him what is good for humanity and bad for humanity?
Yeah, it's a fair question. At this point, I'm kind of up in the air of what he means, this bubble of agency.
Yeah. It's mysterious, probably deliberately so. It's intriguing. Westworld's
And then
very good
finally,
at being intriguing.
Yes, that is perhaps the best thing it is.
Mm-hmm.
Very intriguing. So finally, we go to the airfield hangar where Delores and Ciroc debate who's in control and whether humanity can be saved. And a duffel is delivered to Caleb. And as they board the plane to leave, he questions aloud whether Delores' plan is actually the best one.
What is in the duffel bag, Jim?
Guns?
I think
Guns? I don't know.
it's Gwyneth Paltrow's body.
That explains why it's so light.
Yeah, her head's in the
She
box. Her body's in the bag.
Uh-huh.
I there again, another fucking mystery. What could possibly be in that would be worth pushing it to another episode?
I don't know. I really can't think of anything other than like there's a couple of big guns in there.
That's what I'm thinking. It could be guns.
It's a lack of imagination on my part.
Yeah, but yeah, because it's got a weird shape to it. It's not. It's approximately its size. It's not uniformly rigid because there's like droopy parts of it and stuff. I don't know. I don't know what you put in there. Skis.
So Caleb in this scene is having sort of a crisis of conscience moment where he's questioning, he's getting nervous about who he is, what he's done in the past, whether he's actually on the right rails here. And he says as much to Delores. And there's this moment where this duffel is delivered to him and he looks down at his hand.
Mm-hmm.
If this is Aaron Paul's hand, somebody needs to get this man a manicure. If it's supposed to mean something other than just like there's some dried blood from Liam on his hands, then it was beyond me. But I think that's what I took away.
I think that's what it is. It's just his hands are bloody, covered in blood. He's worried about it.
Maybe we can get David Duchovny in here. He can be the hand double for Aaron Paul. Because Jesus, those hands.
What's wrong with the hands?
Well, his thumbnail, man, it's all fucked up.
Well, if we're gonna talk about noticing weird things about hands, check out Liam Dempsey Jr.'s. He's got like a coke nail on his pinky that you would not believe.
That's his genre nail. He's snorting genre every other day.
You just scoop it in by the nailful.
Yep. Huh. I hadn't noticed that.
I didn't notice Aaron Paul's thumbnail, so there you go.
At this point, I'm totally up in the air on who the villain is. I think Ciroc has the potential as a villain here, but Delores, she might be a liberator right now, but what does she do with us once our strings are cut?
Yeah, and also, like, I don't know, how epistemological do you want to get? Like, is it bad that humanity goes extinct in, like, a cosmic sense? It's almost like, to an outside observer, who's the good person, who's the bad person? Like, is it better to save life that has no meaning and no real challenge, or is it better to let it run its course? I don't know. I think those are some really interesting ideas that I wonder if the show will grapple with as well. I guess kind of like, look, I
think it is
with Caleb saying like maybe people shouldn't know their fate, but I don't know. That's like, if there was an asteroid that's going, like if the man knew that the asteroid is coming to kill us in 30 days, should they say? Should people get a chance to spend those 30 days in the way they see fit, even if a lot of people are going to choose this to like do anarchy and chaos and fucking purge on a grand scale? Or should you live the rest of your life out? No, it's kind of like, I forget, a couple weeks ago, someone asked, there's a story, I think in the news about some village in China where the old matriarch had cancer and no one was telling her just so they wouldn't upset her, and she was old anyway. And I'm like, that's kind of fucked up because maybe she would want to set her affairs in order in the last few weeks. Like, that always rubs me the wrong way, depriving people of if they're, it's one thing to not know, but it's another to know and just be ignorant of something.
And then there's, the example we just covered, the Majestic, where on a man's deathbed, Jim Carrey refuses to tell him that he's not his son, even though he knows it.
Yeah. Well, that's
so how close are they to death? Like,
you're right. How much change could they do? Like, you're right. There's, even with me, who has a pretty strong aversion to that, there's certainly places where, like, or with children, if like a child's dying or has days to live, like, why would you tell a 5-year-old down and explain things that they can't even grasp, like mortality and stuff? Why wouldn't you make them as comfortable until the end as possible? But people that still have agency, people who aren't literally dying of a heart attack, or children who can't conceive of things. Like everybody else should have their free will and their intelligence respected, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, that's the end of the episode.
Yeah, that is the end of the episode. Let's get to feedback. We've got some at westworld@baldmove.com is where you send this stuff in, and we consider it, and this is the result. First up is Jamie. Said, first, I meant to send this message in a few weeks ago, but the red plus white mix that we saw with the robot liquid mixed with blood, and again this week, blood mixed with the white waves of the ocean, probably symbolizes life and death. Back in college, I took a course on mythology, and the one thing that stuck with me is that in Asian cultures especially, white often symbolizes death. Think of a body that's been completely drained of blood, where conversely, red symbolizes life. Think of the blood that keeps us alive. I think you're onto something there because, that mysterious gentleman that was pure milky white until he got the blood injected to him and he turned pink. I mean, that's it right there. I mean, that's it in play. So I appreciate that, and I'll be I'll be incorporating that in my analysis in the future. Mark says, I have a question about the data laws that have been mentioned a few times in the season. It's mentioned that Dempsey Sr. is in the right place at the right time to get access to huge amounts of data before the new data laws come in. Does that mean the Insight only has human data up until this point? And if not, how are they bypassing the current data laws to record data on people since the laws are passed? What about people born after the data laws were passed? If Insight truly does have all this data, I'm struggling to understand why they needed data from the park. Given the park was only access to a privileged few, what possible value can it have when added up to the huge amount of data already held by Insight? We actually talked about this a lot in the main part of the outline, but do you have any additional thoughts? I thought like this. So is it quaint and naive when we're talking about how are they bypassing the current laws to record data on people since the laws are passed? If Robo Hobo and Insight is as powerful and wealthy as they say, they can just ignore the laws.
Mm-hmm. And pay the fines.
And pay the fines, or pay off the people so they don't have oversight, or, use their system to predict when they'll get caught and then prevent that from happening. Like,
how toothless are these laws? We don't know much about the laws.
Yeah, I just feel like that it would be almost laughably easy for a company this powerful and wealthy to do whatever the hell they want, regardless of the laws. Now, what you said earlier on was that I think you're supposed to understand that it's more of like only they have it, because once they have this market cornered, any other smaller company that tries to do anything or skirts the law will be ruthlessly punished, probably by Robo Hobo telling the authorities that they're doing the wrong thing. And then they can investigate and be destroyed. And you see that a lot when you have, like, they call it regulatory capture, where a powerful, wealthy segment of of an industry or a business that is supposed to be regulated by the agency becomes they in fact co-opt that agency and use it as an arm to bludgeon competitors and to stifle innovation and to engage in other kind of gross rent-seeking behavior. And I think they're playing with that more than it's really a challenge for Insight to skirt the law.
Yeah.
But also, they play it both ways, because Insight respects the law enough to not install tiny pinhole cameras everywhere to get eyes and ears on every citizen in the world. So that
do you need that when they're all carrying slim phones in their pockets? Like
that, not only that, but it'd probably be illegal to snoop on that. But also, if you got a predictive engine, it's probably just pretty easy to find out where people are, because you just know where they're going to be.
Yeah.
So, and you can,
we don't know what data is protected. Surely not all data is protected, right? You have to have location services for a lot of the things that they're doing. Like, you've got to know who's in these automated cars, where are these automated cars going. There's certain data that has to be given in order to function.
Yeah, maybe you can't collect data without their knowledge and awareness, but how many people would click through I agree to anything just so they can get the latest Snapchat filter or, whatever, install the latest video game. Let's move on to John, who says, good riddance to Liam. Oh, you think Liam's not going to come back as a simulation? You haven't gone all the way down yet, John. I couldn't tell if he's bad at acting or bad writing, but it wasn't super convincing with Liam trying to justify why it's a bad idea to share all the data with with all the people. Cosign. Also, I thought taking people off their loops fell flat. Maybe I'm desensitized with a similar scene with Mr. Robot where a protagonist with the push of a button can have the world and her smartphones discover something altogether at once. No one questions this as a hack or spam. It's just time to throw rocks through a window. Yeah, it'd be funny as a prank to do, like, send every Verizon mobile user a tweet saying something along the lines of, I know what you did last summer, and just see what people do.
Right.
The one thing, I guess the one thing that I kind of jibes, like, it'd be one thing if you got a generic alert like that, like, I know what you did last summer. But if you got a file that when you click open has detailed information about everyone you're living with, everyone you love, everyone you care about, and you know some things are verified, like you probably know, grandma has a health problem. Like, I guess if I got a detailed dossier on my life out of nowhere, it would be very disturbing, and I would tend to believe it over like a news article saying, oh no, that was just fake news, that was just a hacker, that was just blah blah blah. I'm like, well, someone's got that fucking data. That data was pretty fucking compelling and scary. Maybe we're giving it not enough credit for how immediate that impact would be.
I think in that scenario, yeah, you're probably right, but they didn't show us that amount of data, right? They didn't show us that sort of deep insight into everyone They simply said, oh, in 10 to 12 years, you're going to be on a dock blowing your brains out, right? It's the amount of insight that they showed us, no pun intended, sort of didn't match up with the reaction. So maybe they needed to show us more what's in those files.
Let me play devil's advocate. Let me play Nolan's advocate. They did this exact same scene with Caleb a week or two ago, and no one said his reaction, which was essentially instantly being red-pilled.
Because he had context, right? He had Delores standing there explaining exactly what Rehoboam was, exactly what they did. Like,
and he had been a series of insane experiences that led up to that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
So, Devil's still going to jail. Advocacy failed. Jesse says, I was wondering about your guys' thoughts on a few things. Is there some great individual acting performances in the series across all seasons? I think I definitely like the dialogue that's written for Sir Anthony Hopkins the best, though. As far as pure acting in their roles, though, to me, Ed Harris takes the cake. What do you guys think? Evan Rachel Wood is tremendous, as are Thandie Newton, Tessa Thompson, and Jeffrey Wright. Thoughts?
And Aaron Paul. Everybody's doing everything right in the acting department.
The acting of the series has, especially of the main cast, has never been a problem. Once you get away from that main cast and you get to like random goons and mooks and security guards and technicians and things like that, it goes downhill fast. But yes, they give Anthony Hopkins the best lines, the best dialogues, and they dress him up real fancy, and he gets his well manicured, cultured English guy on, and it's just like fucking catnip to listen to. And all of them, like they all, I don't know. I think I have not been super impressed with Evan Rachel Wood's Delores since season 1. But I
feel like that's more of a failure of writing,
or not even a failure of writing, just a natural progression of her character, that she was so relatable and so empathetic in the first season, and then she's turned into the Terminator. She's the Destroyer, literally. That it's a lot harder to grasp that, that character and get a good handle on it. For what does that character look like? I don't know, but like Thandie Newton continues to really impress, and she's got a very similar, kind of sly, knowing delivery of her lines that Anthony Hopkins brings to the table. And I think it's no accident they're related. Jeffrey Wright's incredible in every fucking thing I've ever seen him do.
Yeah. It's about the charisma. For me, like Maeve and Ford have just charisma off the charts. Delores has almost no charisma in a lot of these scenes. She's just very much like laser focused and sort of just get out of my way kind of thing. Yeah, whereas Maeve is that way too, but she's way more charismatic about it.
Yeah. Let's move on to John. Westworld is more than a show to me. So far, every season has become my complete obsession every time it's on, and I get totally lost in a nonstop theory crafting and Easter egg hunting and future hint finding as everyone else who follows your podcast goes on Reddit and listens to 20 other podcasts, etc. Podcast bigamist, eh, John? No. However, though it pains me to say this, I have to side with Jim on this episode. I didn't want to think it, but I've already done a second watch, and the whole middle of episode 5 felt weak and remains weak. They didn't do anything at all interesting with the genre concept. There have been some fascinating things written about the way the show plays with genre, but this is just dumb. Due to silent era and back literally meant that you would see the world in black and white? What? Why did they have Ash and Giggles show up? What purpose did they serve in any of their scenes? They didn't seem to help with anything Delores and Caleb were doing. They show up, hang out for a bit, find their profiles a couple minutes before everyone else, shoot Liam maybe, and then leave. That last part is what they're doing. Because everything else, you're right. Like, they didn't need to write a scene where Caleb and Delores stand in front of the fucking armored vehicle in a shootout and need to be saved from being flanked, which they weren't even flanked. They just let them be simply flanked. You could have just staged that and written it better. But you needed to add some kind of uncertainty to what happened with Liam, or else it's a straightforward shot, like then you'd know Caleb absolutely shot him, and they're not ready to talk about that yet. They're not ready to show that. So having Giggles and Ash there, Skittles and Ash, whatever they're, Marshawn Lynch and Ash, they're there to add that uncertainty. So that's it. There's a scene where Delores is on a subway and it shows her looking through the contact lens at Ciroc's history and Robo-Hobo. Then it cuts to a subway tunnel overlaid with the Rehoboam circle. I'm hoping this is a hint that we are in one of those possible futures being mapped out by Rehoboam, and if they wait until the very end to reveal that, I think people are going to be pretty pissed. I don't know. I mean, this show succeeds or fails based on how its final reveals are, whether they are come out of left field, whether they fit in with everything that came before, whether people see that as clever and satisfying. Like that's the problem with these mystery box shows. Until you open the box and see what's in, you don't know whether it's been worth the journey. And sometimes it absolutely is, and sometimes it absolutely is not. And I think in this golden age of television, more shows than not have delivered on their promise than failed. But the jury's still out in Westworld. But
and I think the ones that have done it the best have also been emotionally resonant during the journey.
True.
And that's just a place where Westworld is not really doing it for me. And it's always been like this. Like in retrospect, season 1 was fucking amazing. Season 1 was probably the most emotionally resonant of any of the seasons so far. But that capper really just, it recontextualized everything, and it made that season so much better. Season 2 sort of is where
it was emotionally resonant, but it was in the margins. You cared about more of the B class characters. I've forgotten the star of the Kitsuya episode, Akishita. That was the guy, that story, which was largely a compressed 1 hour retelling of the entire season 1 arc of Delores and Maeve, etc. But yeah, season 1, super easy to identify with the hosts, super easy to see their plight and feel see yourself and their struggles. Season 2 didn't have that. I think it's really easy to, and a lot of people have resonated with how Caleb feels about being stuck on his loop, and how feels like no matter how you bust your ass, no matter how much you try to improve your score, you're still denied the possibilities that some people get by birthright, or through luck or accident, and how frustrating that is in our modern society. But Delores and even Maeve, it's hard to care about Maeve when you don't even know the nature of her reality. But that can all, if the last 2 episodes are amazing and really tie this and say something profound, all will be forgiven, especially if you appreciate that all these building blocks that might have been puzzling when you're looking at them in isolation, unconnected, if they all come together kind of like in season 1 into something bigger than the sum of their parts. I think that's the hope with a show like Westworld, that they're going to really stick that landing. Matthew says, I agree with Jim that the middle dragged. The build-up and reveal of everyone learning about their loop was poorly executed, and the genre drug didn't seem to serve any purpose other than to guise the lackluster action. Mainly, though, I think some basic storytelling elements this season feel off. Like, who am I supposed to be rooting for and why? Does anyone else find themselves rooting for Ciroc? I'm beginning to think the show wants me to, and here's why. He's human, I'm human, and that's great. He has a clear backstory and motivation that I can understand. Everyone he loved has died in a nuclear fucking explosion. He's trying to stop similar cataclysms. He has traits I admire. He's badass, he's worked his ass off for a well-intentioned outcome, and he has tried the hard way to save everyone, i.e. trying to fix those outlier humans, not just sending them out for the war, but trying to heal them, as twisted as that still is. And yeah, sure, he's taking all of our freedoms, but in the world of the show, we are literally all going to be extinct. Those are the stakes he lays out, and this is where the storytelling is confusing to me. It seems to me that most narratives portray the villain as unstoppable until the final act, wherein the heroes then summon the will to defeat them. But right now, Ciroc is getting his ass handed to him by Delores, so despite his villainous tendencies, killing a few people mercilessly, I'm naturally rooting for the underdog. Surak is one of the few characters not controlled by Robo-Hobo or a host, thus all his acts are on his own, they are happening quote-unquote live, and I'm therefore interested in what he does. With Caleb, for example, I'm still not sure he is even making his own decisions or being controlled by Delores, similarly with Bernard. Instead of investing in those who may be controlled, I find myself just waiting to see what is going to happen to them. Even with Delores, it feels like she is just following her own preordained plan to checkmate, undeterred at each step. But with Ciroc, at least I know he is the master of his own destiny. Finally, I feel like the actor who's playing him is doing a great job. What do you think of this analysis so far? Because I think that's something they're playing with.
Yeah, so in a traditional narrative structure, this would be like an Act 2-ish
You're halfway through Empire Strikes Back, yeah.
Right, and so the protagonist would be the one getting shit on here. Mm-hmm. And you're absolutely correct in assessing that Ciroc is being defeated at every turn by Delores. So the tendency is to think that Ciroc is the protagonist, but I'm not sure that that's true. Like I said, I'm very much as confused as you are, where the villainous and righteous lie in this show.
Yeah, especially when you got the an aspect of Delores opining that her and Bernard are still working on the same team and in fact are family. That would unite all the hosts and perhaps humanity, or at least the humanity stuck on fruitless loops against Ciroc. But it's weird, and they continue to develop this point. Matthew does, and says, finally, I want to add, this is no Thanos-type situation where Ciroc wants to cull half of the life of the universe to save it. It seems to me in our real world right now, we are headed towards a situation where inactivity on things like climate change, rising nationalism, and a fight for dwindling resources is going to mean the collapse of modern society or the deaths of perhaps hundreds of millions. I'm not an expert, but it's definitely not crazy to think that the sky is fucking going to fall unless we act collectively and pronto. The chances of us doing so, however, seem pretty close to zero. Thus, if suddenly a Robo-Hobo came in and delicately got us all in line and it saved millions, and in the show's case, saved us from extinction, I'm pretty sure we should take that deal as opposed to rejecting it for our own selfish need to feel like the master of our own path. Besides, we obviously are in a loop right now in the horribly unequal society we live in that's inevitably leading to catastrophe. I don't know. Give me a Ciroc any day as opposed to the cliff we are fucking sprinting towards. And I just want to point out, there's many people probably listening to this podcast, and certainly if you just say this out on the street, that would be horrified that you just said that. Like, there is many people who, at least from the relative comfort of their existence right now, would gladly die a quote-unquote free person master of their own destiny than to live in a sheep pen with other sheep. Now, I've always wondered, like, would they say that at the end of a barrel of a gun? Would they say that in the face of a mushroom cloud? Would they say that I found out actually very recently they will say that in the face of a global pandemic.
They'll say that about other people, I think.
That's the interesting point. But I don't know. I think there are those that they say that and they mean it. They will follow
some
through.
People,
yeah.
Yeah,
but then some people say it's because they're badass and they think they're immortal and they're too clever for their own good.
Or they have no stakes. They're not invested in the outcome of it, right? Like,
right.
Other people are going to die, and so of course they'll make that decision.
Yeah.
I don't know, and we talked at length about this during the episode. It's a shades of gray kind of thing. It's a really hard thing to just give a yes or no on because there's so many factors. There are so many wrinkles in that equation, so many variables. Like, how close are you to death? You know,
Here's another
do we
wrinkle.
actually have free will?
Do you trust Ciroc to actually be the save you? Like, he wants to put you in the sheep pen. Once you're in a sheep pen, he can butcher you. And why would you trust someone else's judgment and ability and ideas of what that you should do, what they should do with your freedom, than you trust your own self? And I get that side of the equation for sure. Like, if you could trust Ciroc 100% to save it, and then, you know, hand control back when it's safe to do so, that's a whole different story than just forever giving up your right to make a choice and forever trusting your hand into some greater plan that you don't understand and didn't sign up for.
And are the choices of a single person inherently better than the choices of, like, the emergent choice of an entire populace?
Yeah, crowdsource that wisdom.
It's right. I mean, it's a fair question to ask.
Chris says, I want to keep it short and simple. You can see Liam's bodyguard and Bernard telling the technician outside the control room of Rehoboam to take a piss at around the 24-minute mark. It's clearly dark outside. However, in the next scene from that location, around the 36-minute mark on my time, it's daytime. This could be an oversight in filming, but combining this with other evidence, I think it's yet another clue to the pile pointing towards a few different timelines. Obviously, there's also the different rings and some of the transitions in the episode. You're right, but on the other hand, Bernard was taken from a rich socialite party that I would believe would probably not get started until midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And then they get spirited away. They, you know, there's a lot of things that happen, and it doesn't take too much of my imagination to think that you could go through a dawn cycle. This is all happening in one evening.
Yeah.
So
I'm not sure.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, some of these things are production errors. Some of these things are deliberate. Some of these things are just people not keeping track of the timeline over multiple weeks. And they're fucking with us with timelines and simulation anyway. Okay, Zeke is our final. He's our hammer for this week. He wants to know, what does Ciroc actually do? He has got control of the system, and there is and in there access to all of its data. Does he input the data? Does he adjust variables? Can he himself choose to rewrite someone's story, or does Rehoboam do that by itself? Can he use Rehoboam to be like Delores and walk around in a virtual safety net of planning and ability? Can he himself write human history as he sees fit? While his motives may be as simple as control, what does he really want? World peace, money, to have a world where his brother can live peacefully? I actually think we can answer those questions pretty clearly. What do you think, Jim?
So, I don't know, if you take him at his word, yeah, he wants world peace. He wants everyone to continue to exist and be as happy collectively as possible, that benevolent dictator thing. And I also think the thing that he does with Rehoboam is he controls the outcomes. You can see it in the stock market scene, right? Where, like, Dempsey asks, like, which outcome, what's it going to do? Go up or down? And he's like, which do you want? And then it lines up, like, he looks at his pad and it lines up a trajectory for the stock market. I think that's what he does. He decides the path of humanity.
Yeah, Robo-Hobo shows all the possibilities, and then you select which one is desirable, and Robo-Hobo tells you what are the inputs into the system that made that happen. And that's
I think executes the changes on society that need to be made to get that outcome.
Yeah. Now, at one point, like, you know, one of the things we talked about is, like, is there an emergent property to Robo-Hobo where it starts making its own calls and locks Ciroc out? Has that already happened?
Yeah.
I think those are interesting questions. But as far as how it works, I think you're right. Young Ciroc in the stock market scene, that kind of lays out the whole thing right there. Also, what is Robo-Hobo programmed to do? Is it simply to track and display, to track and filter and act choices? Could it be a full-blown Delores given the circumstances? Could it hire assassins, tell people what to do, and for all intents and purposes achieve whatever goal it wants? I'm open to the possibility of Robo-Hobo being inhabited by someone, but I rather think it is not just a tool, that it should be a Delores-type AI. That said, I ask again, what is Robo-Hobo programmed to do, and what is it trying to do now?
So I think by the end of this, it probably is a Delores-type AI, and I think Ciroc is the ghost in the machine. Because, you know, that line about him, like, saying, I have ensured that you're going to live on beyond any of us, I think that's only figuratively true, or only literally true, actually. Figuratively, I think if you say, okay, Robo Hobo is being controlled by Ciroc to produce the outcome that Ciroc wants, then you need some sort of intelligence to do that once he's gone. And it would make sort of a natural sense for him to put himself into the machine. And maybe that's why we're only seeing Ciroc in these present day things appearing as hologram, right? Maybe he doesn't actually exist. Maybe he's dead now. And this, ship, this cage in the sky that he's in, this glass house in the sky, is really just a product of that simulation. It's possible. I'm not sure that the show has told us that yet.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think those are all very strong possibilities. And also, like, what was Robo Hobo programmed to do? Like, that's not super interesting on this show, because Delores was programmed to be the damsel in distress and to be a fuck toy and to be a reward for winning a quest. And she ends up being a leader of a robot rebellion that might lead to the extinction of humanity. So, like, what was Robo Hobo programmed to do? Who gives a shit? It's a sophisticated learning machine that has potentially unlimited capacity and potential. It could be like a super version of Delores. So that's the question you should be asking, not what it's supposed to do, but what it could do given emergent qualities and its learning and its time to iterate itself. Comforting thought. So that's all we got for this week. I'm sure we'll have lots more to talk about on the Instant Take on Sunday night, which we have right after the East Coast showing of Westworld every week, and much more on the full episode next Tuesday. We will be back then, but until then, I'm A.Ron.
And I'm Jim.
Have a great rest of your week.